And here we are, everybody. We are without the maestro of the comms today. So you have to bear with me. I'm about a year unexperienced in this whole clicking buttons thing. So eventually we'll get her figured out for you. But welcome to Data Day. We're going to talk about truckload demand with our main man, Dean Cook, the data expert, and the bodacious cowboy, Jeff Dickinson, is going to join us as well. Talk about a little data. So before we get going, actually, we are going.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
See what I mean? Hey, you got the stutters when you're at the beginning here. But welcome, everybody. We're going to bring him on in. Bring in Mr. Dean Cook. Dean, how are you, my friend?
Oh, good. That was a funny intro.
You like that one, eh?
Well done.
Hey, you know what? Usually it's Ryan doing the intro, and I just kind of sit back. Now I'm like, oh my God, I got to talk and click all the buttons and make sure people are muted, and then unmuted. Then, like, he's the maestro of the comms, man.
Very slick.
He's
good.
I think I'm going to change his name.
Just a little bit rusty.
Just, do you think? I kind of felt the gears going. Kind of like when truckers used to blow turbos when they used to be late for me on all my orders. But how are you boys doing today? What's going on?
We're good. Good to be with you, Dan. Good to have you back.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Thanks. You know, every day I'm kind of feeling a little bit more energy and vibrance, I think, is the best word. So it's I'm actually day 25, 24 or something now, eating only food. So I'm ecstatic. I'm good to go.
Right.
I seem to be getting a few more things done. I'm not napping in the afternoon anymore, which is kind of a give and take, if you will, because man, they were awesome to be able to have nap in the afternoon.
Hey Dan, I'll tell you one thing right off the bat. I can hear it in your voice. Your voice is so much more crispier.
Right.
What it was.
Thank you.
It's awesome. It really is.
Yeah. Towards the end of the day, I tend to mumble. But what can you do, right? I mean, it is what it is. At a certain point in time, you got to you got to take the good with the bad, and you know what? As long as I see an upward trend, I actually got released and discharged from the pain clinic yesterday.
Oh, good.
So it's actually really good news because I'm starting to get discharged from all the different departments at Princess Margaret, which means that things are happening. But I got a big scan on the 23rd, and then I got my big appointment on the 30th. So get my G-tube out.
I am praying for you.
Thanks, brother. Thanks. But we got some stuff to talk about today because we're talking truckload volume, quote, or lack thereof. We're looking at, we were just talking off air, 12 days till Memorial Day. 12 days, there's the puppies. 12 days till Memorial Day, Canada Day, which will really start to paint a picture for us for summer and kind of what's going on. So, Dean, take it away, my friend. What do we got? What are we looking at, man?
Yeah, I'm here at the KSM Advisors Conference in Indianapolis talking to probably 120 carriers, large truckload carriers, that mostly contract, but there's a few that are in the spot market. There's a mix of flatbed, dry van, reefer. So it's a good representation. When I finished my freight market update, they were largely, I would say, shell shocked. And I kind of tried to get them to open up and ask questions, but they were thoroughly depressed. And I asked the KSM folks why, and they said they're doing it tough. The general consensus is they're doing it very tough at the moment. For two reasons. One is costs are up, but also demand is very flat. And I thought it'd be worthwhile today just to talk to our listeners about where truckload demand is sitting. Because if you follow Jason Miller, he will have said, and Jeff talked about this a little while ago, we just don't see any catalyst on the horizon that will lift demand for things trucks haul.
Mm-hmm.
The three of us and everyone on the call here today, we're probably spending more on services than we were on physical goods a couple of years ago. We're going to restaurants, we're traveling more, we're driving more, we're buying more gasoline. spending more on food, so more services. Some of that trucks haul, but mostly we're spending a lot, more on services as opposed to the physical goods side of GDP.
Sure.
We, on the show last week, we talked about market timing. We're seeing the bottom in spot rates. That's our. I looked at our 3-day rates today, and they're up a penny per mile. So, but they've been bouncing around at the $1.60, $1.61 a mile for 5 or 6 weeks now. So we're not seeing any upward inflection. Just to remind everybody, the last 3 freight recessions lasted 17 to 20 months. We talked about this last week. We're at 13 months into the current one. So if the last season's patterns occur, it's May before. So it's the fall season from now till May till September before we would see the market start to turn up based on history. So if rates are bottoming out now and contract rates follow spot by 4 to 6 months, then that puts us into the fall peak shipping season. So that's our best guess where things are at the moment. But if spot rates are bottoming out now, that's not a good time right now because demand is so lackluster. If you've been listening to all the LTL carriers on their earnings calls, the spring bump was non-existent. They didn't see it. And, we're talking about a produce season being a potential boost in volumes. We're not seeing it in any meaningful way just yet. Volumes are still behind. Doesn't mean we won't catch up because they do have, when citrus, some crops report quarterly. So the numbers get a little bit hard to track because of the timing of the seasons. They're such short seasons. So even though California's behind 20% year over year, that doesn't include their citrus volume because it reports quarterly. So, but right now we're sitting behind where we would normally expect to be. And as we talked about in the show last week, Memorial Day is going to be a key turning point because it's kind of in the middle of when spot rates normally should be increasing to the middle of the year because spot rates typically do peak around July 4. So, the more we look at the market, the more it looks like 2019. I know we started the year saying it looked a lot like 2018 did it was a good year. It went south in a hurry, and a lot of the data points look like 2019 did, which was a horrible year for carriers. And it was just a slow grind all year round. And every week we look at the data, spot rates are kind of just drifting sideways, which is what they did in 2019. There was no peak season in produce. It was just a slow grind. And the reason I'm sort of laboring this point, if you say what's going to change the market will turn here because of an adjustment in supply capacity, not demand. So we're not seeing any demand event. So if the market is going to turn in the fall, what's got to happen? Well, there's got to be capacity's got to realign with the amount of volume in the market. So carriers are still leaving the industry, but it's a really slow rate, right? Mm-hmm. So the number of carriers that leave each month is about 2,000. That's about 2% to 3% of the entire for-hire truckload market. But if you lose 2% in the spot market, which is only 15% of the freight, it's like a 14% drop in capacity. Right, so small numbers in the spot market. That's what'll turn the spot market rates up. If you keep losing 2% each month, right now it's kind of flat. We're not losing capacity at an accelerating rate. It's actually slowing down, and we're not seeing carriers leave. Why? They're coming off a very profitable period in the last 18 months, and diesel has just dropped 12 cents in the last 2 weeks. So while ever diesel continues to drop down, it gives carriers runway to hang in. And that's what they're doing in the most part. So hanging in means that the market doesn't turn. It's just flat because there's more trucks than loads pretty much all year, and there's downward pressure on rates. So I thought what we'd do today, that was kind of a long intro, but I thought what we'd do is just cover some of the data points that I track, that we all should track, because they're all publicly available data sets, just to give you a sense of where they are. Cash shipments came out this week down 2.5% compared to last year, and down 2.5% versus 2019. That's cash shipments. I think that's about 40 billion in freight spend. ATA tonnage index is not out for April, but March was down 5% compared to this time last year. And probably the most reliable index is Jason Miller's truckload ton mile index. March volumes were down 2.7% year over year, but that was coming off last year's record high in last March. Right? But the overall consensus is that, volumes are flat. And Jason Miller is arguably one of the best data analysts in the market when it comes to truckload. His statement on LinkedIn on one of his posts said, we're not seeing any movement in demand that'll get us out of this current freight recession. So remember I said 10 minutes ago, maybe 9, that we're at 13 months into this freight cycle. There's no demand event on the horizon, and we're seeing demand slide sideways to being lower than this time last year. So that's where we sit with some of the main indices. The number of new trucks being ordered is sort of decreasing rapidly. So there's a little bit of a pessimistic look there. Used truck prices are coming down. There was a little bit of a glimmer of hope this morning or yesterday. April's industrial production numbers came back in the positive territory, up 0.4%. Industrial production provides a lot of truckload freight. Flatbed carriers, more good news this morning. Single-family housing starts up 1.6% last month. Single-family permits, which lead housing starts as a leading indicator, the number of permits being applied for future single-family homes, up 3.1% in April. So we've had some good news come into the flatbed market, but that's not enough to lift the entire market. That's the point, right? And we're coming off
in the right direction.
Yeah. So just to sort of summarize, we're still losing capacity in the long haul sector. Rates are sort of bottoming out, showing some signs of maybe being flat to up, but that's just 1 week's worth of data. Major leading truckload demand indices are telling us that volumes are down compared to this time last year, but we've still got more trucks from this time last year looking for loads. And that's why you're seeing downward pressure on spot rates. And until that excess capacity leaves the industry, we won't see supply and demand balance out. So remember, demand is going to be flat to down. Supply has got to leak out of the industry before we get equilibrium. Our best guess is that's a third quarter event. But that assumes that we see shippers go back to normal shipping cycles, and we see a strong retail shipping season again, which is a big if.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because as you're sharing that info, Dean, I'm looking at a few points. So one, if we typically run the 17-month cycle and we're at month 13, now is prime time for sales reps to be getting hold of prospects, developing the relationships, building that relationship over the next couple of months. So when capacity, when the need does hit, you're the first person they think of. So I think it's as much as a lot of reps tend to check out for the summer because it is harder to get a hold of their prospects and vacation time and all that. It's actually prime time now. If you're the one that steps up and doubles down on your efforts, you can be in front of a lot of the people when you're actually ready to get into the market, when they're ready to get back into the market. And then as we were talking about trucks up, capacity up versus freight and everything, we go through this all the time, all the time. This is almost like a reoccurring dream or nightmare, depending on which side you're on, right? And I think personally, and I'd love your guys' personal opinions on it. COVID was an anomaly in what we normally have, right? COVID showed us that when every company in North America starts doubling and tripling ordering stuff, our supply chain can't handle it.
Right.
But what we do as an industry is we say, okay, well, we're going to double down and we're going to get more trucks. We're going to do this. We're going to pay higher prices for used trucks. We're going to ride this wave. But every time we ride this, I don't know where Dean went. Every time we ride this wave, then it eventually hits the shore. And when it hits the shore, we have another 2019. And it just seems to me, and Jeff, I mean, you've been in the industry long enough. it's this constant wave of, oh, let's just bring Dean back in. It's a constant wave of ebbs and flows, and I
mean, mountains and valleys for sure,
yeah.
And
I mean, how many have you been through in your logistics career? Like, I've been through many. 7 or 8. Yeah,
many. And the thing that's most concerning to me is what Jason Miller said 2 weeks ago, that he doesn't have his finger on any specific boom that's going to trigger momentum in the industry.
Right.
And it's so true. And then to back that up, and I'm not the doom and gloom kind of guy, I'm pretty positive kind of guy. But when I read trend economics analysis and what they forecast, they don't believe that we're going to come out of this until April, May of 2024. I mean, completely flat, and then another dip, and then a rise. I don't think that we can handle something that bad. I mean, when you really look at it, where we are right now, and being flat, and the carriers just getting by a credit card thin margin, it's not going to be sustainable. And I really hope that they're wrong. Dean, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I just I always try to be positive and have a positive view, and always look for the positive. But there's this gnawing feeling I've been getting about a reemergence of 2019 again, because the difference. There's a big difference this time around, right? So if you think about this freight cycle, we're coming out of the pandemic, record high spot rates, record profits. We also had record high diesel prices and record high used truck prices and record high insurance costs. So everything's kind of distorted right now. But the gripping reality is that we've come back down in terms of line haul rates for spot market freight to about 10 cents a mile off where it was in 2019. But our operating costs to a truck are up 20 cents a mile without doubt. Now,
we're at a 10% delta.
Yeah, what's giving some carriers the runway is they were able to pay off a lot of debt during the pandemic. PPP loans helped a lot of carriers.
Made a lot of cash.
And that's giving them a lot more ability to run at a lower rate. Mm-hmm. So, if I peg $1.75 as the operating costs of a long haul truck in the spot market, that includes a lease payment of $2,700 a month for the truck and $700 for the trailer. That's 31 cents a mile. But if I own my own truck and trailer, I could run for $1.75 less 30 cents a mile. And so this is why.
How long, Dean? Yeah. How long can they sustain that?
It's not sustainable.
It's not.
And so that's what's different about this cycle. The runway is much longer. Right, it's this drip, 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 which is what 2019 was. It was a slow grind, and it slowly forced people out of the industry. Although we had some big bankruptcies in Q2, like Celadon, New England Motor Freight. Like, there were some big names went south there. So, but we're not seeing that this time around. I looked at one of the data points I watch very carefully is the JD Power used truck auction inventory data. And at auction, I'll quickly pull up the numbers here. During the pandemic, so in June, just after the pandemic hit, 1,054 trucks hit the auction blocks in June of 2020. Last month we had 684. February, March we had 774. So we're still not seeing the same number, but what I will tell you is the number of trucks going to auction are almost identical to what happened this time in 2019. So think about auctions as a way for excess capacity to be sold off. And the auction data is showing these are a lot of the higher mileage trucks that people were buying because they couldn't find trucks. Used truck prices are down about 25% in the last year, but they're still 20% higher than the last peak in 2018. Right? So there's so many different things going on right now. It's hard. It's just, we can't use the past and say this is what's going to happen, because For example, last week we talked about single-family housing spending was down 12% in the last year. Commercial construction's up 30% in the last year. So there's all this bifurcation going on in the market that really makes it hard to say that the trends are sustained. There's nothing you can really grab onto, like Jason was saying and Jeff was saying, that's going to say, hey, we can bank on produce season, or we can bank on peak shipping season for retail inventory. The data's just not there to support any sort of positive outlook right now.
That's scary.
So would you guys think, or I'll go out on a limb here, and I think the downturns like we saw, I mean, the latest one, obviously the one that a lot of people pay attention to is 2019. I actually think it was a cleansing of the market. For the most part, I mean, Celadon was a good carrier at certain things. They weren't so good at other things. New England Motor Freight, same thing. But I saw a lot of smaller guys that were kind of, in my opinion, almost ruining rates to begin with, go out of the business because they didn't understand their cost. Maybe there were 4, 5, 6 trucks and they were spending their money before they made it. So they didn't have that runway. To me, that's a cleansing of the market. And do you guys feel, or do you see that cleansing maybe happening again this year?
You know what's the biggest thing, and you probably read it, yellow freight, in their negotiations and stuff. Is this going to be the turning point for yellow freight to cease operations? I mean, if you think about it, right? Not too much freight in the market. They rely on it heavily. They have huge debt. They're in negotiations with their workforce. Are they going to make it? I mean, are they going to be the next one, to hit the slates? I don't know. This is
and with that comes a lot of their local distribution carriers that they use quite a bit, that they go and drop all the freight off on their dock and use. I know 3 Canadian carriers that are like contracted to YRC and Yellow and all that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, a long time ago, when St. Johnsbury went out of business, they said, what are you going to do with 1 billion pounds of freight in the market like that? Not necessarily true now if that happens, because there is no freight, per se. But it's just a concern. It's a concern. Another concern of what happens if they go out to the market itself. That's just something.
There's a lot of freight to be sucked up, right? Like even when Celadon and New England Motor Freight went out, their assets got sucked up pretty quick. The freight market sucked up the rest of the freight pretty quick. And I don't know, maybe you guys can recall, but for me, it was within 2 weeks. It was like a null issue. Everything that we had that we were moving with Celadon when they went out of business was on other carriers within a week. And I spoke to a couple of people that were heavily invested with New England Motor Freight. And other people just sucked it up right away. I mean, it was, don't get me wrong, it was sad. I don't want to be that dick that was like, oh yeah. But it was like the market sucked it up. And again, I would hope that we learned our lesson in 2019 going into COVID. And it looks like we didn't, because more carriers kept popping up at massively higher costs than we've ever had before. But it does look like, Dean, people took your advice and banked a lot of the cash instead of spent it, right? And I don't know if that's just because everything was closed, so you couldn't spend it for so long.
Right.
But it was, it was that shift in the market, right, that we see, and we see it every couple of years. I think the last few years has been the anomaly, because it used to be every 5-6 years there was kind of that big dip. And then it was 2018 was the anomaly, 2019 was the anomaly, now 2021, 22, they're the anomaly. It's like, well, what do we really have to balance some of these numbers on? All we can do is, like what Dean said, is look at it and say, okay, well, costs are down 10 cents or freight payments are down 10 cents, but our costs are up 20 cents. because of insurance and fuel and wages and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I know a ton of people that started paying their driver's salary as opposed to miles. And if you pay salary based on, or you do your mathematical equation based on miles, and those miles get cut in half,
exactly,
that's a huge loss, huge. And I'm wondering if carriers are going to go back to what I saw a lot of them do in 2019 was start using the spot market. You know, I know one of my good friends in particular, he owns a trucking company and a brokerage, and he put almost a third of his freight into brokerage that was on assets, furloughed his drivers, laid off his drivers, parked his assets, and just paid the monthly installments on the trucks and all that. The ones that, you know, the ones that he owned, he parked. The ones that were still leased, he moved. And they made twice, if not three times as much money as if they were actually running the trucks themselves with assets parked. And it was like, and he was saying, he goes like, I got great customers that send me out. It's when I'm down in Texas or when I'm down in Alabama or when I'm down in Tennessee, I get like pillaged on the way home. He goes, but I've got to get home in order to get the freight back out.
It's all about strategic survival and doing the right thing to keep yourself afloat. I mean, and then what happens is you get that vacuum effect with the spot market where it's pulling down those contract rates as well, you know, and you see it. I mean, when I did some analysis and I was looking east to west, you know, east to west, west to east, and south, you know, to north, and vice versa, and you can see it there. It's just, you know,
hey Dan,
it's very tough out there.
Well, I was just thinking about this. As you were chatting, I went and pulled up the American Association of the Association of American Railroads data for last week, because, you know, I watch chemical carloads a lot because the chemicals used in every manufacturing process. Chemical carloads represent a pretty big chunk of the carload volume, down 3.4% year over year. Intermodal, which is, you know, the competitor to truckload, down 12% year over year. Total railroad volume down about 12.1% year over year. So that sort of supports the bleak outlook for demand for just things that trucks and trains haul.
Yes,
you know, it's a lot less, and I think we've probably labored the point a lot.
Now, does oil fall into the chemical category? Because oil is used in so many damn products out there. I mean, it's amazing when you look.
Petroleum and petroleum products is up 13% year over year.
Okay, so that's not a bad.
So now, when we say year over year, would we consider last year?
Right.
Right. And again, guys, I think we all three of us agree that we're pretty positive people when it comes to the market. We obviously, we all want to see the market be at a perfect balance for shippers, receivers, that perfect balance of freight. And we all want to see it. I mean, this is our careers. This is how we feed our families. This is what puts a roof over our head. And this is how we help other people put roofs over their heads. But I look at it and I say, like, during COVID, we experienced something that I've never seen in the almost 30 years I've been in this industry, ever. Like, not even anything remotely close. We've had the ups and downs of the roller coasters. We've had the bellies come out our arseholes because we're thinking things are, you know, can remember 2000 and things were, you know, everything's done. It's over with. Just forget it. Like, everybody pack up and go hide in the wilderness somewhere. And I look at it and I say, you know, costs are up. Do I think drivers are getting paid what they should be paid for what they do? Yes. Do I think they've probably been underpaid in certain aspects? Yes. Do I think now shippers are starting to keep drivers on docks longer? Yes. Talk to my neighbor, does runs for a specific company, been doing the runs for 3 years. For the first time last week, he spent 15 hours on a dock. And then all of a sudden the next day it was 10 hours. Then he goes, Dan, like, my entire week. He goes, that's 25 hours of my week gone. And he goes, and he doesn't have a sleeper cab. He does a day cab back and forth. So he goes, like, I'm up Craps Creek without a paddle. You know, and it was like, it's an anomaly. I asked him last night, 6 hours on the dock yesterday.
Mm.
So from 0 time on the dock, it was drop and switch, to now in the last, call it 5 business days,
Right.
he spent over 31 hours sitting. 31 hours sitting.
So,
and I said, "Are you paid by trip?" He goes, "I'm paid by the trip." He goes, he goes, "So I got to get my trips in."
Yeah.
And he was exhausted.
That's
Yeah.
true.
So Dan, I was just reading what Mark put up there. A really good point about team carriers, about folks, switching to teams.
Yeah.
One of the things that it's sort of I heard the other week and I never thought about is a lot of people that can't sell their used truck because they paid more than what it's worth today, because prices have dropped, so they're kind of committed. They've got to run as hard as they can for whatever they can. Mark's point about teams, people are pumping more miles into their tractor weeks, and I guess the theory is they've lowered their rate per mile because the focus.
So I've got an issue here, gents. I can't see any chat.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
I thought it was just people just were listening and not putting anything. So we have comments, because I have 0 comments on my restream.
We've got comments. Mark's talking about liquid resin. He said more and more carriers are teaming up to drive their truck 24/7. They lease the truck, do next to no repairs, hand it back in at the end of the lease. I'm seeing rates of cross-border for under $1 a mile. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid it's never going away, and now carriers want brokers to divulge rates shippers are paying. Buckle up. And that's what got me thinking, because in normal times you'd say, "I'll just sell my truck and get out." Well, what if you paid, $160,000 for a 5-year-old truck that's now worth 110 or 100?
Yeah.
You could see why people are forced to sort of hang in there and keep running.
Yep. Well, I mean, you look at the housing market, right? You just take the housing market, for example. A couple of years ago, my neighbor sold and got 400 above asking. When the guy moved in, his bank came back to him like 60 days later and said, "Okay, you need to put an extra X amount down, or else we're not going to hold this mortgage because the house isn't worth that." Like it's crazy how inflated costs are. And then you're handcuffed, because he was handcuffed at that point. He had to come up with the money or the bank was going to recall his mortgage. But, as he says, "I wanted the house, and the house is worth what you want to pay for it." And I said, "Yes, but if you don't have the money, it's worth what somebody else thinks it's worth that's going to lend you that money to pay for it," right? So it's these used truck markets where these guys have paid astronomical amounts to get into the industry because, oh my God, the amount of money that's being made during COVID is absolutely insane. They're in a pickle. And then if they do go out, now if they have to, file or whatever and get 80 cents on the dollar, it's leaving a lot of money on the street again. Right. And you damn well know if there's any kind of brokerage going on, they're not paying the suppliers. Right. Like, sorry, it's unfortunate, but it does happen, right? And then in situations like this, or in economies like this, we start seeing a ton of that double brokerage happening. We start seeing a ton of these companies pop up that take a bunch of freight, offer ridiculous rates, pay ridiculous high rates, but they never pay, and they take the money and they run. Like, these are where all these scams come up. So now we have to be even more diligent on top of trying to make sure our costs are in line, and I mean, they just keep stacking up and up and up as to what we got to do. But I still, even with all of that said, guys, I think it's a prime time for salespeople to be getting in.
But now, though, Dan, not in summer though, because you need to do it now, though, right? Because we're in sort of peak travel season where people are working and in their offices and going to conferences, but that kind of dries up pretty quickly, I think. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what time. It's like June. We're getting to June and things start to slow down travel-wise. Yeah, well, because you got Memorial Day, and then you got 4th of July, and then it's summer season, right? Then it's like people are going on vacation, or they're taking a staycation, or they're, things are slowing down. And we all know, we've been in sales a long time, very few people make big decisions in the summer.
Oh no,
because it's like, well, and not only that, it's like freight volumes are slowing down, right? So like if
You don't need more of that.
yeah, and it's like, yeah, you know, but what I'm saying is more along the lines of, okay, well, I used to have 15 loads a week. Now I've got 5 loads a week. I got a carrier for it. Great. But when you ramp back up to 15, those other carriers that were handling the 10 have retooled and gone somewhere else. And now it's a perfect time for you, the freight agent or the salesperson, to jump in and say, hey, listen, I'm here when you're ready. I'm here when you're ready. And I think it's
when the market turns.
Absolutely. Market turns, shipping season, like busy season kicks in. I mean, I talk to a lot of people. I know just offhand over 30 people that have ordered snowmobiles, brand new snowmobiles for this year. Well, they're going to start being built in probably August or September, which means all of the pieces, the rubber, the plastic, the moldings, the ejections, everything is going to start shipping, right? And that's just one thing. Then you've got shovels. Then you got all the stuff we have for winter. And, with the heat out west right now, the forest fires, the drier conditions out west for Canada anyways, we're already starting droughts when typically they start mid-June to beginning of July. We're like a month and a half early for droughts.
Yeah, the same with Christmas too. They start running June, July, starting to get out there. So when the demand is there, they can start shipping it to their local stores. Get rid of this stuff.
So Dan, the discussion that has to be happening now, and maybe I'll paraphrase what we've already said, but now's the time to have the discussion, because I think shippers are acutely aware. I did a piece this week in my blog post about elephants or goldfish, who's got the better memory, shippers or carriers. Well, shippers have got very good memories. They've got memories of elephants, and they remember how tight capacity was in the last 2 years. They are very aware that there's trucks are leaving the industry and capacity will tighten eventually, and it'll probably be around peak season in the retail holiday season coming up. That's the discussion to be having now about who's going to haul the freight when things get busy. Right. And I think because there's an inevitability around that. We just don't know exactly when, but we know that discussion that's going to happen.
You got to start looking at what ifs now. You really do. Yep. You would rather attack it proactively than when it happens and you react to it. That's a bad position to be in. Very bad.
100%. So, Dean, I know you got to get moving early today. So what's happening this week? Share with the people what's going on and any announcements.
Yeah, speaking of the Motor Carrier Insurance in Education Foundation, they got a Western Conference. All the insurance underwriters and some truckload carriers get together to talk about trends in freight. That's on in Phoenix tomorrow and Friday. So, and then we've got our big broker symposium on in Carmel, California on Monday and Tuesday. And then I'm going to hit some of the big produce farms in Salinas and Watsonville on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then get back home next Wednesday night. So busy week.
You should set your camera up at one of them, and we'll do a secret impromptu live from the Salinas produce market and see what's going on.
I want to go to the Driscoll Farms Salinas plant, where they load about 550 trucks a day out of there.
Oh, that would be something.
Oh, it's a phenomenal plant.
You got to set your camera up. I'll send you the link to grab a Restream app. Set your camera up. We'll go live from the plant, man. That would be cool.
Put a GoPro on your golf hat, walk around.
Funny about that. Yeah, I've got one.
The one that's right on your chest. You're going through.
I put it on my head.
There you go. Like I have one for my snowmobile helmet. It sticks like this far out. So every time I go under trees, I can just keep whack. Jeff, what do you got going on this week, Brother Bear?
Oh, not a whole heck of a lot, except my real podcast starts on Monday. I did an intro this past Monday, and looking forward to it. I do have a guest. I'm not going to name that person. But it will be a great show. I'm looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. So I can't wait to let's go. So
nice. Good for you, brother. And why don't you want to name the guest? You got to give it some promotion, man. You got to give it some promotion. You just keep that secret. Oh, you're doing the old cliffhanger. You keep it secret, and people
tune in. You want to say, it's That's what it's all about, my friend.
All right. All right, everybody. Have yourself a remarkable day. And listen, take the information from today and act on it, because that's what Data Day is all about. Data Day is the day where we get this whole huge spectrum of information, pull pieces, talk to your customers. Hey, the freight cycle, we're in 13 months. It's typically 17 months. What's your plan for when things switch? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? What's the process? How can I get involved now? That's the big question.
That's it, man. Get into that right positive mindset proactively. Do it.
That's it. Hit it now.
Do it now.